Hey, 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 what's going on? Welcome back to the Bring the Sing podcast. I'm your host, The Hammer, and we got a good one for you today. This is episode 22. As promised, we are ranking the draft, the best winners and losers of the draft, kind of recapping the draft. We're not going to go over all 32 teams because a brother needs some sleep, but I figured, better late than never. Time to rank the top 5 winners and the top 5 losers from this 2026 NFL draft. So let's get right into it. I'm not gonna actually rank these like number 5, number 4, number 3. These are just my top 5 winners in general, and you can put this in any order that you so wish or desire. So number 1 or number 5, so to speak, is the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I know that I have been really, really critical and really tough on this team, and for a while I didn't really know which direction these guys were going in, but I actually really thoroughly enjoyed this draft class quite a bit. So they kind of surprised everybody. Also, go ahead and peep my previous episode 21, where I was doing a mock draft. And I got a lot of those right. I'm not going to lie. I always tell you guys that I know ball, and some choose to listen, some don't, so it's crazy. But this is one that I actually got wrong. I did not expect them to draft Jeremiah Love at number 3 overall. But honestly, I think the more and more I think about it, the more I actually love the pick. And not only that, they got a offensive guard in Chase Besantis from Texas A&M, who I think I actually had going in the first round. So for them to get some first round talent in the second round was great. They drafted Carson Beck out of Miami, who was also previously in Georgia for a little bit. And a lot of people are really critical of Carson Beck, especially in college. But I really liked him, man. I think he didn't really necessarily have the right fit in Georgia, but in Miami he was doing some things with that rock, man. So I definitely like that. I'm definitely one of the few people that actually like Carson Beck. I feel like he's kind of one of those that are really polarizing figures that you either love him or you hate him. But I really like that kid, man. I think he's got a good arm. He's got a good stature. He's got a good size as a quarterback too. It's like you don't want these twigs running around at quarterback. You don't, and like not even twigs, so to speak. But you don't want these small guys running around like Jake Locker or something, or like those a lot of those guys that were drafted in like the 2000s, 2010s that just never panned out. You could kind of like guess that they weren't going to pan out just because like they're just like small guys, And like speaking of like small guys, like there are guys who make it work, like Russell Wilson for a few years, and Drew Brees, and like even Bo Nix has been doing his thing, and he's kind of on the smaller side in terms of like stockiness. He's not like a short guy or anything, but like at least those guys had some like meat on their bones, you know what I mean? Like they had like a certain thickness to them. And I'm not saying that Carson Beck is necessarily like a thick quarterback, but he's got one of those builds that could hang around in the pocket and stay in the pocket, and take those hits. And like I said before, with like Russell Wilson and Drew Brees and all that, like they had some meat on their bones, so they were able to sustain those hits. Like some guys, they come into the league, and there's one guy specifically that I'm thinking of that I'm going to mention here and when I'm talking about the biggest losers in this draft. Is they're too small for the position, and I never want to write off somebody for their size, but like sometimes like you kind of just know ahead of time that they're gonna be a bust, and you don't want to think about that. You kind of want to, like a great example of this is like Josh Rosen. Like you watch him in college, and it's like, okay, he was tearing it up in college, but that guy, he didn't have an NFL build, and he got absolutely creamed and destroyed, and he went 3-14 in his first year, or 3-13 his first year. The second year he got replaced by Kyler Murray. So it's just like you can kind of guess who's going to be a bust. Now, then again, there's also not a lot of third round quarterbacks that pan out or do well, so there's not a lot of high expectations for Carson Beck, but he's not going to be the day one starter. He's going to come in He's going to learn under Jacoby Brissett, which I think is like the perfect kind of bridge quarterback in this system. So, and now they got a new coach, they got a new system. Like I'm really liking this draft class, and they got a defensive tackle, Caleb Proctor from Southeastern Louisiana. In the day 3 of the draft, they got Reggie Virgil, Carson Sherrar, Jaden Williams. They added some good depth to this team. I rank these guys in my power rankings, I think, like in the bottom 30s, if not like 32, at the exact bottom. I was real harsh on the Cardinals, but now I'm starting to see the vision. I really like this draft class a lot. Moving on, got the Cleveland Browns as one of my 5 winners of the draft. They drafted a real good offensive tackle coming out of Utah, Spencer Fano. They also had another first-round pick, and they drafted KC Conception from Texas A&M. And that guy, he's been making a lot of headlines, and I think that's definitely one of the steals of the draft. If you listen to my last episode, you could hear me talking about him and how I really liked him as a prospect. And I think that's definitely going to be some good solid help. Both first round picks are going to be good solid help for either Shedeur or Deshaun Watson, whoever decides to come in and step up to the plate. But they also drafted another guy in the second round. They had 2 first rounders. They had 2 first round picks and 2 second round picks. So it's kind of hard to lose the draft when you have 2 firsts and 2 seconds. They drafted Denzel Boston out of Washington, very, very underrated wide receiver. Watch out for him. They kind of stacked the deck at wide receiver because that was one of their biggest weaknesses. And they drafted Emmanuel McNeil Warren, the safety out of Toledo. Honestly, definitely another steal. I think he was 100% first round talent, and the fact that he dropped to number 58, draft pick 58, was kind of crazy. And then on day 3, or not so much day 3 because they still had the third round pick where they picked the offensive tackle out of Florida, Austin Barber. But on day 3, they added a plethora of guys. They added 2 tight ends. They added a linebacker named Justin Jefferson. That's kind of a name that's destined for greatness, so to speak. But they drafted 2 tight ends. They drafted Justin Jefferson out of Alabama, and they drafted another quarterback to add on to their 50 million quarterbacks. So that one was probably the only pick that I was really scratching my head at, because it was like, why do you need so many different quarterbacks on that team? Honestly, all the other picks besides that were pretty awesome in my opinion, and I really like this draft class. Number 3, I actually got the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys, I can't believe that Caleb Downs actually fell to them at number 11, the safety from Ohio State. I think that guy's going to be an absolute stud, and I couldn't believe that the Giants didn't pick him right beforehand. The Giants had 2 opportunities at 4 and number 10, and they didn't pick him, so that might be foreshadowing for biggest losers of the draft, but we'll see. Anyways, they had 2 first round picks. They had they got Caleb Downs, like I said, from Ohio State. They got Malachi Lawrence out of UCF. They didn't have a second round draft pick, but in round 3 they got edge rusher Jayshawn Barham, and then in day 3 of the draft they pretty much got some more depth with offensive tackle out of Penn State Drew Shelton, who I actually really liked a lot too. Cornerback Devin Moore out of Florida, defensive lineman LT Overton, which don't really know too much about him, but when your name is LT, I think you're also kind of destined for greatness at that point too. And then wide receiver in the 7th round, Anthony Smith out of East Carolina. So I really like their draft class quite a bit. Now number 4, I'm actually gonna exclude. I'm looking over my list, and I'm going to exclude the Denver Broncos just because they didn't have a first or a second round draft pick, but I do really like the Broncos draft, so I do have to step on my little soapbox and talk about it. I'm not going to include them in my top 5 winners, but since I'm a Denver guy, I do have to acknowledge that Denver actually had a pretty good draft class for what they were working with. They traded out of the second round and got an extra 6th round pick, or extra 7th round pick, I should say. They got a defensive tackle out of Texas A&M who I'm really excited to see. I think he's going to be the replacement to John Franklin Myers. They got another running back out of Washington, Jonah Coleman, who that guy, it seems like he had 17 touchdowns from scrimmage, and he could run, he could catch the ball, but most importantly, he can block in the pocket, and that's going to be huge for Bo Nix when he comes back from his surgery, which just happened today. And there's a lot of clickbait articles that are saying, Bo Nix had another surgery, blah blah blah. This was planned. This was a planned surgery. This was an expected cleanup procedure that they needed to do after the first procedure, and he might miss like the first like few weeks of the like team activities or whatever, but he's going to be back for training camp, and God willing, he's going to be back for training camp and preseason and all of that. So anyways, they in round 4 they got a offensive guard just for the depth, I'd say, Cage Casey. They got Justin Joly from North Carolina State, who honestly, that guy's a big guy, man, and he's fast, and he's kind of like one of those David Njoku kind of guys where anytime the ball is thrown to him, it looks like he's catching the ball, which I really enjoy and I really like to see. They got a safety out of Illinois, which honestly, after losing PJ Locke to the Dallas Cowboys, I think we definitely needed some safety depth. So that was awesome. They got in the 7th round. Or I guess Miles Scott from Illinois was also in the 7th round. But yeah, in the 7th round, I think they actually hit it out of the park in the 7th round because they got a tight end out of Utah, Dallin Bentley, who's built like a Bentley, man. It's not a Chrysler, it's a Bentley, dude. Like that guy, he's like Gronk. Like he's like it's crazy, man. He's like Gronk Jr. or Shaq or something. He's huge. He runs over people. He can block. He can catch. And he always finds the open space in the football field. It's kind of similar to Travis Kelce in that where he could go deep, he could go short, but he inside outside he's gonna find the open space. And I was talking about that with my dad the other day, and I both me and him were very, very excited about this prospect, especially the Broncos haven't had a good tight end in years, man. So if just one of these tight ends can work out, that would be amazing. And then Mr. Irrelevant, they had they got a linebacker out of Buffalo, not the Bills, but they got a linebacker out of Buffalo who actually leads the entire college football the entire college football program with most forced fumbles. Like he is a hit stick he's like a human hit stick for real. Like it's crazy. This guy, I'm watching highlights of this guy, and like it's like every single time he comes in for a tackle, he just shatters bones, man. And he's the enforcer. You need an enforcer in this team, and I think Red Murdoch could definitely be one of those enforcers for sure. So I'm very excited about him for sure. Anyways, moving on to the actual ranking. Number 4, I got the Jets. Believe it or not, man, like these guys absolutely hit it out of the park. This is actually one of my favorite draft classes in the entire NFL. It was crazy. So at the number 2 overall pick, as I mocked, they got edge rusher David Bailey out of Texas Tech. Probably the most NFL ready prospect that there is right now. I really, really liked him coming out of college. Then they got the best tight end in the entire draft class, Kenyon Sadiq, coming out of Oregon. And then at wide receiver, Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. They had 3 first-round picks, and Omar Cooper Jr. fell to them at number 30. I couldn't believe that they were able to come away with this heist with edge rusher David Bailey, then Kenyon Sadiq, and wide receiver Omar Cooper Jr. It's just, I think they hit 3 for 3 in the first round. And then in the second round, they got a cornerback in D'Angelo Pons, also out of Indiana. Round 4, they got a defensive tackle, Darrell Jackson Jr. out of Florida State. They got a quarterback in round 4 as well, quarterback Cade Klubnik out of Clemson, who I wasn't the biggest Klubnik guy, but, at round 4, it's like you kind of take a flyer on him, especially when you have 2 fourth-round draft picks. At number 6, you got an offensive guard, Inez Cooper, coming out of Miami. And then number 7, you got safety VJ Payne from Kansas State. So, honestly, a very, very solid draft class from the Jets, and I can understand the vision now. It's obviously they still got Geno Smith at the helm, but they surrounded poor old Geno with a lot of help. So I think the future is kind of looking bright over in New Jersey right now. And at number 5, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They got one of my favorite picks in this draft, edge rusher Ruben Bain out of Miami. That guy's a killer, man. He's a hunter. That guy will get to the quarterback pretty much every single time. It's crazy. And the fact that he dropped to number 15, that was pretty diabolical. Now, I can't remember my mock draft, but I want to say I mocked him to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I really don't know. Anyways, don't quote me on that. I'll have to look back and see. But yeah, edge rusher, this guy, absolute killer. Best mindset that you could possibly have at the edge rusher position. They got a linebacker out of Missouri, Josiah Trotter. They got a wide receiver out of Georgia State, Ted Hurst. Keontae Scott, defensive back out of Miami in the 4th round. They got DeMonte Capehart, the defensive tackle out of Clemson, who that's definitely another underrated pick, 1,000%. They got a Notre Dame offensive guard, Billy Schrouth, and then a tight end in round 6, Bauer Sharp, which I mean that name just by itself kind of sounds like he's gonna be a good tight end. Anytime you have a last name Sharp as a tight end, it's like okay, hopefully you can live up to that name. And then I want to give an honorable mention to the Tennessee Titans. I think they had an awesome draft class too. I only had 5 spots for this winners, but like they got Carnell Tate out of Ohio State. I think that was an awesome pick, and that was another one that I actually mocked to the Tennessee Titans in the previous round or in the previous episode. Later on in round 1, they got edge rusher Keldrick Falk out of Auburn. These SEC edge rushers, you can almost never go wrong with. These guys are all beasts. They're all animals, In round 2, they got a linebacker out of Texas, Anthony Hill Jr. They got an offensive guard to help Cam Ward, Fernando Carmona out of Arkansas. They got a running back from Penn State, Nicholas Singleton, who that guy, I think he could do some damage, especially for a 5th round pick, man. Like that don't sleep on Singleton. Don't sleep on Singleton. Like you heard this right now. Like little Bring the Sink hot take. Don't sleep on Nicholas Singleton out of Penn State. Round 6, they got Jackie Marshall coming out of Baylor. They got the center from they got the center. They got the center from Indiana, Pat Coogan. And then they got a tight end, a lot of 7th round tight ends going around. But they got a 7th round tight end out of Oklahoma, Jaron Kanak. So definitely a honorable mention. Probably could have cracked the top 5 if I had organized things a little bit better. But yeah, I really like this draft class quite a bit, and I understand the vision that they were going for. Another honorable mention, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers had a solid draft. I don't necessarily like the Drew Aller pick in round 3 from Penn State. I never liked Drew Aller in college, and I don't know how somebody who couldn't really succeed in college that well, how it's going to translate into the NFL. But pretty much every other pick besides that was pretty good. They got Max Ihenacho from Arizona State, and that was kind of like that was an audible that they called because they were actually trying to get Mekhi Lemon before the Eagles traded up and sniped him away from the Steelers. So this was a pretty good audible pick. They got Jeremy Bernard from Alabama in the 2nd round. I'm not going to go through all these guys. They had a lot of draft picks, and most of you guys probably never even heard of anybody besides the guys that I just mentioned. But yeah, like they definitely get like an A- grade from me. And the only reason it's not like an A or an A+ is because of that Drew Aller pick. Anyways, so that's my top 5 winners, and now here we go with the top 5 losers of the draft. So these aren't necessarily losers. Obviously, all of these guys could prove me wrong. But I didn't really like the New York Giants draft class all that much. I feel like they should have gotten Caleb Downs, and the fact that they got Francis Mauigoa out of Miami, the offensive tackle, instead of Caleb Downs, especially when they already have an all-pro tackle, that was definitely interesting. I do like Arvell Reese, especially the fact that he was projected number 2 and he went number 5. I think that was cool, but for the most part, like, They just didn't really impress me all that much, especially what really turns me off is just passing on a generational safety talent in Caleb Downs and going for Francis Mauigoa, who honestly wasn't even really the best tackle in his draft class, and I said that in my previous episode. I know I'm plugging in the previous episode quite a bit, but yeah, I didn't really like the New York Giants draft class at all, especially like they traded Dexter Lawrence for that 10th overall pick, and they ended up doing pretty much Jack Diddley squat with it, So, if they had traded Dexter Lawrence and gotten, Caleb Downs, I would have been like, okay, I understand, but like they got an offensive tackle out of Miami, and he wasn't even really ranked as a top 2 tackles. That was definitely a head scratching move for sure. Another loser is the Miami Dolphins. They had so many picks, and I feel like they didn't really do anything with it. They got an offensive tackle out of Alabama and Caden Proctor. Excuse me. Then they also they had 2 first round picks. They got a cornerback, Chris Johnson, out of San Diego State. They kind of missed out on some genuine talent like that they could have gotten in this first round, and instead they kind of went with the safe route, and that wasn't necessarily something that I really agreed with. And like I said, they had a bajillion picks, and they didn't really do anything with it. Like Jacob Rodriguez, Caleb Douglas, Will Kakmarak. That one is actually solid for the tight end out of Ohio State. Wide receiver Chris Bell out of Louisville. Like, I'm not gonna go through all these names. Like I said, like you can search up the Miami Dolphins draft class. But yeah, these guys, they did not impress me, especially for how much they need. That was interesting. Now, I think one of the biggest losers of this entire draft was the Los Angeles Rams. I could not believe my eyes when I saw that the Los Angeles Rams drafted Ty Simpson, quarterback out of Alabama, at number 13. That was crazy. That was diabolical, dude. I'm still struggling to explain why or how the Los Angeles Rams did what they did. Your quarterback is coming off an MVP season. He's going to have maybe 2-3 years left. If you wanted Ty Simpson so bad, you could have traded down. You could have gotten more compensation for that, because he was not going to go in the first round. And you guys heard me in my previous mock draft. This one is one that I totally got wrong. Matt Stafford needed some help. He has a lot of talent at the wide receiver position and the tight end position, but he needs people to protect him. He needs help on defense. This was crazy, especially since they only had 5 draft picks, and they decided to go with Ty Simpson at quarterback at 13. Round 2, they got a tight end, which they already have 4 tight ends, by the way. Max Clare out of Ohio State, probably the 18th tight end picked out of Ohio State this year. In round 3, they got an offensive tackle in Keegan Trost from Missouri. They got a wide receiver in round 6, CJ Daniels out of Miami. And then a defensive tackle, Tim Keenan. None of these are necessarily needs besides Keegan Trost out of Missouri. This was crazy. Out of the 5 draft picks, there was only one of them that could possibly help them right now. They're in the Super Bowl window, and it's closing because Matt Stafford probably has a solid, good 1, 2, 3 max years left in his tank where he can play at an all-pro MVP level. And the fact that, just look at Sean McVay's face and just Sean McVay's demeanor and body language after the draft, after day 1 of the draft, when they were talking about it, he was not a fan at all. He was not a fan of the pick of Ty Simpson at all. And honestly, I don't blame him. I don't know what they saw. Has an Alabama quarterback ever worked out? And don't say Tua, because that didn't work out. Don't say Jalen Hurts, because that barely even counts. This is crazy. I don't understand why you would spend such high draft capital. And this take is, I imagine this take is going to age so horribly, and Ty Simpson's going to win 5 Super Bowls in the next 10 years. That would be absolutely hilarious. But I just don't see it happening. This is absolutely crazy. I know a lot of people make themselves look like clowns when they talk about quarterbacks who have never stepped foot on the NFL field before, and they're talking about it like they know it all. But this was a head scratching move, and even it's like I'm not even the only one that thinks this way. Their own coach thinks this way too. Matt Stafford didn't even reach out to him. It was Matt Stafford's wife that had to reach out to him. It just made it even worse. This was crazy. I'm not even a Rams fan, and I was frustrated on behalf of Rams fans. So. Wild, diabolical, whatever adjective you want to use to describe that draft, that was crazy. I guess another honorable mention for the winners would be the Raiders, but I don't want to glaze the Raiders up on here. They're a division rival, but congrats on Fernando Mendoza. That guy, he's gonna be a good one, man. Not looking forward to facing him. Anyways, I know I'm kind of all over the place here. Number 4 in terms of my biggest losers, we got the Indianapolis Colts. These guys don't really know what they were doing. I don't ever really know what the Colts are doing when it comes to free agency or the draft. They make a lot of moves where it's like, okay, well, if this works out well, it's probably not gonna be as successful as you think it'll be, and if it doesn't work out, then you just wasted some more picks. And these guys, they didn't have a first round pick. They got a second round linebacker out of Georgia, CJ Allen. That was honestly a solid pick. Everybody else, they got safety AJ Halsey from LSU. The offensive guard Jalen Farmer from Kentucky, Bryce Betcher out of Oregon. That one was a solid pick too. I'll give him Bryce Betcher for sure. They got Caden Curry, the edge rusher out of Ohio State, which he was probably like also the 18th edge rusher to be picked out of Ohio State this year too. So this is one of those where they desperately needed some talent. And they didn't get a lot of talent that they needed. They got some talent, but they didn't get the talent that they actually needed, which was a wide receiver. It's like, especially after losing Michael Pittman, are you just going to be throwing the ball to Alec Pierce the entire time? Like, this is crazy, man. Like, you already have a good, solid tight end, probably a top 10, top 5 tight end in the league right now. You have a top 3 running back in the entire league right now. But your wide receiver 1 is Alec Pierce. And then you don't even pick a wide receiver in the draft until the 7th round in like the 3rd or 4th to last pick out of Oklahoma on Burks. Crazy. Absolutely diabolical. I couldn't believe it. And last but not least, or I guess last and almost totally least, my 5th biggest loser of the draft was the Houston Texans. This team did a whole lot of nothing in this draft, and this was crazy. They need a lot of help, especially on the offensive line, and that's what they addressed in their first round pick, Kalen Rutledge out of Georgia Tech. Who? You tell me. I don't know. This was not somebody that I really had going really high in my draft class, and I guess at number 26 you don't have a lot of crazy viable options, but a guard? You needed a tackle, number 1, first and foremost, but you got a guard? You didn't even draft a tackle in the entire draft, and you got a defensive tackle in the 2nd round, Caden McDonald out of Ohio State, which is probably their best draft pick of the entire draft, but they wasted their time. They got tight end Marlon Klein out of Michigan. They got another guard out of Oklahoma, Fabechi Nwayu. They got a linebacker out of Clemson, Wade Woodaz. It's just like the guy's got ass in his name, dude. He's gonna be a pile of ass. No, I'm just kidding. Shout out Wade Woodaz. I don't know much about this guy, but I just have to crack that joke. Safety. Like, why do the Texans need a safety, man? This is crazy. They got safety Kamari Ramsey out of USC. They got a wide receiver Lewis Bond out of Boston College, and then they got a linebacker. Why do they need a linebacker? They just spent $40 billion on their edge and their linebackers, just re-signing them over the offseason. They drafted another linebacker, Aiden Fisher out of Indiana. Like, they literally were just filling up spots on the depth chart. They didn't actually draft anything for need. It was crazy, and not only that, but they traded 2 mid-round selections just to move up 2 spots to select Rutledge. Like, it was wild. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't believe it. I still don't believe it. Probably not as bad as the Rams draft class. That's by far my biggest loser of the draft is the Rams, and you can book it right now. But the Texans, especially for a team that's trying to get past the divisional round of the playoffs, they did not help themselves at all. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening to a shorter edition, or I guess a normal edition. I've been releasing some pretty long episodes recently, but a shorter / normal edition of Bring the Sink. Please follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Bring the Sink Pod. Again, that's at Bring the Sink Pod. I'm your host, The Hammer. Thank you guys again so much for listening. This has been really nice. Peace.